known as bond counsel to the city, when your now senator was a member of the city council and worked together on financing the high school project and the middle school project and the very beginning of the Quincy Center project many years ago. So it's great to be back, and obviously also had the pleasure of working with your senator as senator recently on a number of different issues, including the opioid epidemic, which he's been a real champion on. So you're lucky to have him.
Yeah.
I appreciate the chance to talk to you a bit about my campaign. I want to start by just saying that this is a great turnout for a city committee meeting, and it matters to show up to stuff like this, right? I mean, we have learned a lot of lessons since this last presidential election. We learn them every single day. But one of the lessons I've taken from it, and this is something President Obama talked about in his farewell address, if you remember that, it feels like years ago at this point. But it's this notion that our liberties and our democracy and the strength of our communities, these fundamental American privileges, are not self-fulfilling. They need us. They need us to breathe life into them and to protect them and be vigilant about them. And we cannot take them for granted, which is why showing up matters. And the good news is I've been going around the state as a candidate for governor now for almost 11 months, with a long way to go. There are people showing up to stuff like this who've never been to anything like it before, maybe in this room. And they are energized and fired up and wanting to do something. And that is good. And we need to build on that energy and sustain it. And a lot of it right now is focused on Washington for good reason. We've got a president and a Congress trying to take us backwards. And we need to be focused there. But we also need to recognize the best we're going to do in Washington right now is hold the line. I mean, we are moving backwards, and the question is how far. The only place we're going to move forward is here in Massachusetts. And moving forward, making progress, that is a fundamental part of who we are too. My entire life, I've been very fortunate. I've been surrounded by people who've proven our potential for progress. The very first time I ever got politically active was the summer before my senior year in college. I went to work on a campaign for a guy named John Glenn. He was running for re-election to the United States Senate in 1992 in Ohio, and I was mostly running all over the state, handing out flyers at county fairs. And there are 88 counties in Ohio, so I was very busy. But a couple of times, I actually got to drive John Glenn to events. And it still blows my mind when I think about it, that this man who sat in Friendship 7 and orbited the Earth was sitting next to me in my Ford Tempo.
This
is an American hero who literally reached for the stars and got there. I got to serve as a cabinet secretary for Governor Deval Patrick, and you all know his life story. It proves the American dream exists, and he never lost sight of all those continuing to reach for it. And there are many others in my life who've proven this point about our potential for progress. People like my wife and my daughters and friends and colleagues, but no one more than my parents. And for those at the breakfast, you heard this story about my parents. My mom is from Cleveland, Ohio, and during college she went away on a foreign exchange program to Spain. 9 months later, she came back married to my 19-year-old Spanish father and pregnant with me. And I love telling that story to parents who have kids going on foreign exchange programs. It really freaks them out. But it all worked out okay. They didn't have a lot at first. My mom had to drop out of college to take care of me. My dad didn't speak English, and he'd never been to college. But he worked his way from laying bricks in a city sewer system to becoming a successful small businessman and a proud American citizen. My mom went back to college when I was in high school and became a public school teacher and a member of the teachers union. And together they put all three sons through college, and this year, against all odds, they celebrated their 47th wedding anniversary, which is, yes, that definitely deserves a round of applause, yeah. But through that example that they set for us, and just through the way they parented us, they always encouraged us to set high expectations for ourselves. And they instilled in us a belief that with hard work and a little help, reaching those expectations was actually possible. Those values aren't unique to me and my family. Those are our values, American values. And no one has reached higher, worked harder, and accomplished more together than the incredible people of Massachusetts. Think about it. We started the Revolutionary War right? We were the first to establish a public school and a public park. The first to recognize one's right to marry whoever you love. The first to make universal health insurance coverage a reality. And the list goes on and on and on. This is who we are. We have always been a leader. But we are not leading right now, not under Governor Baker. I've been frustrated by how little we've accomplished on his watch. But I have been more frustrated, honestly, by how little he's even tried. He's way too satisfied with the status quo. He's too often sitting on the sidelines when we need him, and it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Not ever, but particularly not now, with a president trying to take us backwards, attacking immigrants, attacking our health care, attacking our environment, attacking our democracy. We need leadership. And by the way, leadership is very different from popularity. It is easy to be popular when you don't do anything, and you never take a stand, and your whole approach to the job is being politically cautious instead of courageous. Meanwhile, there are way too many working families across the state still being left behind, and way too little is being done to help them. And people forget this about our governor. He's been terrible about standing up to hate and discrimination time and time again. Ordered state police to detain immigrants. Opposed Syrian refugees resettling in Massachusetts. Defended southern states flying Confederate flags at their state capitals, the very symbols of hate and bigotry and intolerance that we saw on display in Charlottesville. And he stayed silent on transgender rights legislation, only signing it when forced to do so and doing it behind closed doors. In my view, it's not okay. It's not okay. It's not who we are. And it is definitely not leadership. Now, Governor Baker's case for being governor, you all will remember, was not about leadership. It was that he was going to be a good manager. Well, he has failed at that as well. And I know about good management. When I worked as Secretary of Administration and Finance for Governor Patrick, successfully managed the state budget during much tougher times during the Great Recession, while increasing investment to record levels in public education and in infrastructure, and we achieved the highest bond ratings in state history when I was there. Governor Baker is struggling to manage the budget during a period of economic growth. He's continuing to cut funding for programs that desperately need it, and for the first time in 30 years, one of the rating agencies just downgraded the state's bond rating under Charlie Baker. And the reason they gave is that he hasn't followed the responsible policies we put in place when I was there. And this is supposed to be his core competency and is literally his entire case for being governor. As CEO of a health insurance company that covered low-income people in the Medicaid program, I turned our company around, grew it by multiple times. We were considered a leader in addressing the opioid epidemic. So I know about good management. And we can do a better job managing state government. I am sure of that. But here's the thing. Unlike our governor, I believe managing government well is necessary, but not sufficient. Government is our instrument, not our enemy. It's the vehicle through which we empower each other and support each other and protect each other. And it is not good enough to simply accept the world the way it exists and try to manage it better. We need a governor who's going to see the way the world should be and take us to that place. Let's aim high. Let's aim high. Let's be us. Let's give working families across the state a better deal, an economy that works for everybody, not just those at the top. How about a living wage, paid family leave, affordable housing, and higher education, and childcare, an issue I feel passionately about? How about this crazy idea? I'm going to try it out on you. See what you think about this. A transportation system that people can actually depend on to get to work on time. Right? Yeah, crazy. Let's aim high when it comes to our dysfunctional healthcare system. I think we need to implement a single-payer system that is simpler, cheaper, and will do a better job keeping people healthy. And that comes from a former health insurance CEO. Let's aim high when it comes to the opioid epidemic, which your senator has been a leader on. Let's invest more in treatment instead of treating people like criminals. Let's aim high when it comes to other big challenges we face, like climate change, the biggest threat to our planet, and our broken criminal justice system, which is jailing way too many for way too long at too high a cost. And more important than any of that, let's aim high when it comes to how we treat people. We need a governor who sees the value and potential of every single person, who respects everyone, who doesn't need coaching and pressure and second chances to get it right. And I want you to know that if I'm your governor, it won't matter what color you are, what your sexual orientation is, what you believe, whether you are from Quincy or from Springfield, whether you just came to this country, whether you have a disability, whether you're a Syrian refugee. I see you. I believe in you. And as your governor, I will work for you. We have always done better when we see our differences as strengths, and when we recognize that beneath those differences are many more similarities. When we treat each other with respect and dignity and love. So let's do it. Let's aim high. Let's aim high. If we do, I know we can build a better future for everybody. That's the lesson my parents taught me. It's the American story. It's what the people of Massachusetts have proven over and over again. And it's what we should expect from our government and from ourselves. And that's why I'm running for governor. I'm not a career politician, just trying to get to my next elected office. I'm not going to make whatever political calculation I need to make just to win at whatever cost. That's not why I'm in this. I'm in this because I care about people, and I want to make a difference in people's lives. And if that's the type of candidate you want, if you believe we need to aim high, if you want Massachusetts to actually be a leader again, then I really hope to earn your support, and I hope you will join our grassroots campaign. Thank you very much. And before I take whatever easy questions you have, Casey on my team has a couple of things. So do we have palm cards also?
Yes, we all have them.
All right, so you have a card, has some information about the campaign. My website's on there. I encourage you to check it out. Take a lot of pride in the fact that when we take positions on issues, we're trying to be thoughtful and well-informed about them. I think if you look at the policy positions on my website versus the other two candidates, there is a big difference in terms of the depth behind them. There's also an email address on there. I am the first to tell you that I don't know everything. If we don't talk about something tonight that is important to you or you think I need to know about, please email me. There's a sign-in sheet. We'll pass it around. If you sign up on it, it doesn't mean you're swearing to God you're going to support me. It just means you'll be on our email list and you can keep up with the campaign. There's also these cards. If I have earned your support tonight, please fill one out and give it back to Casey. It lets us know you're on our team. I'm happy to take any easy questions.
Do you support a 2-day work week and a 5-day weekend?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I think he was first and then second.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Yes, sir. What is your name?
My name's Joe.
Hey, Joe.
Murphy, and the MBTA is close to my heart. It's an issue I care a lot about. I like that you support making it functional for people trying to get to work. What are your ideas? What needs to happen with the T?
Money. First and foremost is money. Recognizing that we've been starving the T for revenue for decades. We did make some step in the right direction during the Patrick administration. We actually increased revenue during the recession for the T and for transportation across the state. We're 45th in the nation when it comes to the condition of our infrastructure, transportation infrastructure. 47th when it comes to commute times. One of the worst in the country. And Governor Baker's, when he had the job I used to have in state government, he developed this plan for how we're going to deal with all the cost overruns for the Big Dig, which basically foisted many of the costs on the T. And as a result, it has not had the resources it needs to get the system to a state of good repair and make it dependable for people each and every day, let alone even thinking about the types of investments that could be transformational in terms of really helping to spur further economic growth across the state, serve as an affordable housing solution. You know, this idea that we do high-speed rail to Springfield, that's the kind of thing we should be talking about. If it's a commute from Springfield to the greater Boston area, that's an affordable housing solution for Boston, let alone an economic driver for Western Massachusetts. Governor Baker's whole approach to this is insisting we don't need more money. Says he's jacked up fares on riders beyond what was planned and intended by the legislature in the law they passed a few years ago. Cut service in underserved communities, both of which, by the way, drive more people to the roads, which is the exact wrong direction we should be going. Privatizing the T, which is exactly the wrong direction, which just separates responsibility for providing this fundamental public service from the publicly elected officials who are accountable to us for delivering that service. The biggest private contract we have in state government is Keolis, which is managing the commuter rail and hasn't been able to meet its service requirements even after Governor Baker shoveled $66 million more to Keolis. We need to invest more in the T and in our transportation system across the state, in the RTAs across the state, and in the roads and bridges. And I'm supporting the millionaire's tax, which will be on the ballot in 2018, same time as the governor's race, which would impose an additional income tax surcharge on people who earn over $1 million a year. It is the fairest, meaningful new revenue proposal we've had in a very long time that would generate $2 billion of desperately needed new revenue for transportation and education. Yes, ma'am. What is your name?
Tracy Brown.
Hi, Tracy.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the Mass Commission Against Discrimination, MCAD,
Yeah.
and the cuts in their budget, and hopefully there will be an increase in their budget for a couple of reasons. One, having been a state and federal investigator myself, that the process in investigating those complaints has there's a disconnect. Individuals who file those complaints, their witness list, even if it's only one or two, are not being interviewed to be able to demonstrate their allegations. And as a result, it becomes an employer or a housing community's word against the individual who already is at a deficit because they don't have access to documents. And so what happens is the low reasonable cause rate has a lot to do with the investigative process that does not allow the investigators to interview witnesses prior to making at least an initial determination whether they're going to take the complaint or not, which is unlike a lot of human rights commissions across the country. So I come from Seattle, Washington, and it's part of the process, the investigative process, at least from the initial part, is to at least interview one or two people on the complainant side in order for them to be able to demonstrate that their allegations could potentially be true. And so I believe the reason why you have the low reasonable cause rate at the state level through MCAD is because individuals, unless they bring signed affidavits to the investigator, it is highly likely that their case will be no reasonable cause, which is why I think they're probably getting a lower reasonable cause case than you normally would if that individual, at least one or two of their witnesses are being at least interviewed. So if at any, I think there needs to be at least a revisit in their budget for additional investigators and a revisit in terms of their investigative process to allow for at least one or two interviews by their witnesses. Even more so given the direction from Washington in terms of the trajectory that they're going right now to begin to rescind civil and human rights. The new appointment for EEOC is obviously going to change the case processing, change the intent standards to be possibly even higher, and as a result, that will probably trickle down to the state level, at least on the federal civil rights legislation. So I know I've said a lot, but hopefully I'm very clear about what's happening to people and have been for years. And I think a lot of it potentially may be political because in this state, the commissioners report to the governor. In other states, the human rights commissions are a separate entity and they don't report into the governor.
Tracy, you just proved my point that I don't know everything. And I just learned, in all seriousness, a lot about MCAT I did not know. And, you look at all this Me Too stuff that's happening right now, which is, to me, unbelievable. Like, all this, the stuff that's happening in the workplace and what the stories about what men are doing are disgusting and shocking. Like, in a way, you believe it, and in another way, you just can't believe it. But what seems clear is that the system of laws and policies that we have in the workplace for preventing that kind of behavior from happening, and probably other forms of discrimination from happening, and ensuring that those who are violated or to whom misconduct is done in some way have real meaningful avenues for addressing the misconduct. The system clearly isn't working. And it seems pretty clear we're probably just seeing the tip of the iceberg on this, and that this is a pervasive cultural workplace problem. And I'm very concerned about it. And I actually, Tracy, would love if you're willing to be a resource for us and
I
to
will.
talk to me more at some other point about this, to be able to dig in with you a little bit, because this is an issue that I'm very concerned about. And MCAD may be, properly funding or increasing investment in MCAD may be something we need to do regardless. But I'm also thinking about what do we need to do differently in terms of the system we have for preventing this type of behavior, totally unacceptable behavior from happening, and protecting those to whom it happens. And so I would love your help with that.
Okay, just make one final comment and then I'll move on. And part of the problem, as I was mentioning at the tail end of my response or my position, was in other states, the commissioners don't report to the governor, so it's not political, right? And so those individuals report to a board of volunteers who have no skin in the game other than they care about civil rights, and they're from the different regions.
Yep.
So across the state, you have elected commissioners from those particular regions. They then become the board for MCAD, and then the commissioners then report to this board. And then there's no conflict of interest because the salaries are not dependent upon the governor's office. The salaries are basically dependent upon the board, but they're paid through the general fund and the money they receive for every case they close through EEOC or the Fair Housing.
Sounds like something we should think about. Yeah. We will be following up with you, Casey. Yes.
You mentioned, I'm Melissa Shapiro. You mentioned starting out with single payer. My big question for that every time someone proposes it is, how is it going to be paid for? We're already running into issues of how expensive mass health is. I work at Boston Medical Center, so I'm aware that this is just starting with insurance availability. What will it work when it all comes in single payer? And I want to know what plans.
Part of the reason, in my view, we need to move to single payer is because the system we have today is financially unsustainable. We would actually save money overall. Let me speak to this for a minute. So, if you believe, as I do, that access to good quality health care is a fundamental human right, and everyone should have access to the health care services they need to be as healthy as they can be, we don't have that today. We don't have that, as mentioned in the Globe story this morning about this. And our system is every additional, so I was chair of the board of the Health Connector for 3.5 years when I was in state government implementing Massachusetts health reform. I was the governor's key negotiator of the healthcare cost containment law in 2012. And then I was CEO of a health insurance company that covered low-income people in the Medicaid program for almost 4 years. So I know our healthcare industry. And every additional second I spent in it, the more discouraged I got with just how dysfunctional it is. It is based on the premise it's a functioning market. It has none of the attributes of a functioning market. We've got a system today that is way too complicated for people to navigate, way too expensive. It is crushing state government, it's crushing businesses and families, and the quality, honestly, isn't as good as it should be. If you've got a really sick kid, Boston Children's is the best in the world. But for most routine stuff, we're just okay. So it's not working for people, and it's not financially sustainable. Single payer, I think, is the best, most effective way to get to a simpler, cheaper, better system. Let me just give you one example of that. So at my health insurance company, I was very proud of a lot of what we did when it came to coordinating care for our members and working with providers like BMC and others to make sure they were getting access to the care they need. Much of what we did, though, was facilitate a bunch of useless, valueless transactions. We had a whole team of people that would negotiate contracts with BMC and every other doctor and hospital at different rates than every other health plan and different quality incentives and everything else. Then we had a whole team of people that would take all those contracts and input them into our system so we paid all the bills right. We inevitably screwed that up, so we had a whole team of people that would work with the doctors and hospitals to fix all the screw-ups, and every health plan has the same thing. In addition to marketing expenses and a bunch of other administrative expenses, which add no value and actually are counterproductive to a system where you've got hospitals and doctors answering all kinds of different health plans, and people who go to get a service from a hospital where the hospital will get paid a different amount for the exact same service depending on who that person is and whether they're low income in the Medicaid program or in a Blue Cross Blue Shield rich employer-sponsored plan. It's totally crazy. And single payer is a means, it's not an end. But I think it is the best way to get to a simpler, cheaper, better system, which we desperately need to get to. And I am convinced that our overall cost, the overall amount we spend on healthcare today, from all the different sources, from government and from your pockets for premiums and copays and deductibles, and from employers, that total amount that we spend will be less if we move to a single payer system. And we can't afford not to do it. And right now we've got a governor who keeps putting Band-Aids on a system that has gaping wounds and is not sustainable and is going to fall of its own weight. We can do a lot better. We need leadership. And one thing I'll say, ask you to consider, the other two Democratic candidates in this race also believe we need to go to a single payer system. I'm the only one that actually has worked in the healthcare industry. I know the leaders in the healthcare industry. I think I've got credibility with people in the healthcare industry. I think I can provide the leadership we need to get from here to there in a way that's thoughtful and gets to the results we need. And this isn't a 5-minute thing. This is a big deal. There's another candidate in the race who says we got to do it now. That would be a big mistake. We got to be thoughtful about it and make sure we do it right. But if we do it right, we will have a system that works better for people and actually costs us less. Yes, sir. We met at the breakfast.
Yes, we did.
Yes.
You remember a lot of people.
What's your name?
Frank Fournier.
Frank.
Swan. Thanks for being here today. Single payer, I'm glad you attempted to answer that question in under 3 hours, which you will be able to do. And that is one of 3 big issues the people near and dear to me are concerned about. The other 2 being public college tuition, which you mentioned, and wages,
Yep.
specifically the
Yep.
minimum wage. And so I just wanted to ask if you want to go on the record as being fully supportive of a single payer Medicare for all system, as well as tuition-free publicly funded colleges and a $15 minimum wage at the soonest possible time that any of those could happen.
Yep. I am on the record in favor of a $15 minimum wage. I am on the record in favor of a single-payer healthcare system based on the principles of Medicare for all. I actually think we need it to be better than Medicare for all because Medicare coverage is not comprehensive. Most people buy supplemental coverage from private health plans to cover the gaps. There's also Medicare Part C, which is all provided through private health insurers. So all that inefficiency that I talked about in the system that comes from a multi-payer system, if we just did Medicare exactly as it is, would still exist. And so I want to do a system that is based on the principles of Medicare for all, but is actually goes beyond that and is a true single-payer system that cuts out the unnecessary costs. When it comes to public tuition, I'm still looking at this. Part of what I want to understand more is what the costs would be. One thing I'm going to commit to is putting out a proposal and as governor working to at least make it affordable for every single person in the state. It is a huge problem. The cost of public university and college in Massachusetts has been going up at a rate that it's now unaffordable for many, or too many are having to take on huge debt to be able to do it, and they're burdened by it for years afterwards. It needs to be affordable for everybody. That's going to definitely mean free for some. Whether we can afford to make it free for everybody, I'm not in a position to commit to that right now.